The cold poison burned through my veins as my sister kissed my fiancé, my parents watching from the doorway with approving smiles. They murdered me for my inheritance, but when my eyes closed in death, they snapped open 3 years in the past. This time, I'm the predator. The metallic taste of blood and bitter almonds coated my tongue. I couldn't move. The paralyzing agent they had slipped into my tea was working with terrifying efficiency. My vision was blurring, the edges of the sterile hospital room darkening into shadows, but I could still hear everything perfectly. I could hear the rhythmic, mocking beep of my heart monitor slowing down. Is she gone yet? The voice belonged to Vanessa, my sweet angelic younger sister, the golden child of the Montgomery family. Almost, a man replied. Liam Preston, the man I had loved for 5 years, the man I was supposed to marry in 2 weeks. I felt his hand brush against my cheek, not with affection, but with clinical detachment. The doctor said it would look exactly like a sudden cardiac arrest brought on by her pre-existing heart murmur. Clean, untraceable. I tried to scream. I tried to thrash against the pristine white hospital sheets, to claw at their faces, but my body was a tomb. Good, my father's voice rumbled from the doorway. Richard Montgomery, the ruthless patriarch of Montgomery Enterprises. He didn't even step into the room to look at his dying eldest daughter. The board needs stability. With Skylar out of the way, Vanessa inherits her 40% of the voting shares. The Preston merger goes through smoothly, and our control is absolute. It's a shame, my mother, Evelyn sighed lightly, as if she were lamenting a stained dress rather than her daughter's murder. She was a hard worker, but she was always too stubborn, too independent. She would have ruined everything eventually. Tears, hot and furious, slid down my paralyzed cheeks. I had given them everything. I had worked 80-hour weeks to pull Montgomery Enterprises out of the red when my father made disastrous investments. I had covered up Vanessa's DUIs and endless scandals. I had funded Liam's startup when the banks laughed at him. I had starved myself of a life, desperate for just a scrap of the love they so freely showered on Vanessa. And this was my reward. Vanessa leaned over me, her signature Chanel No. 5 perfume making me nauseous. She noticed my open, tear-filled eyes. She didn't flinch. Instead, her lips curled into a vicious smirk. "Don't look so sad, Skylar," she whispered, her voice a venomous hiss right by my ear. "You always said you'd do anything for this family. Think of this as your final contribution. Liam and I will send you some lovely lilies." Liam stepped up beside her, wrapping his arm around her waist. He pulled her in for a slow, deep kiss right over my dying body. The betrayal ripped through my chest, sharper than the poison stopping my heart. I had been a fool, a blind, pathetic fool. The darkness finally closed in. The monitor flatlined into a continuous, high-pitched scream. My final thought was not a prayer for peace, but a blood-soaked vow. If there is a hell, I will drag every single one of you down with me. And then I gasped. My lungs expanded violently, pulling in huge gulps of cool, lavender-scented air. I shot up in bed, my hands clutching at my throat. No tubes, no hospital gown. I was wearing silk pajamas. I scrambled backward, my back hitting a tufted velvet headboard. My heart was hammering a frantic, healthy rhythm against my ribs. I looked around frantically. The soft morning sunlight was streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating my penthouse suite at the Oakhaven estate. I stumbled out of bed, my bare feet hitting the cold hardwood floor, and sprinted to the vanity mirror. The face staring back at me wasn't the gaunt, poisoned, exhausted woman on her deathbed. I looked healthy. My skin was glowing, my dark hair falling in thick waves over my shoulders. I looked to my left. My phone was resting on the nightstand, plugged into its charger. My hands shook violently as I picked it up and tapped the screen. The 14th of October, 2023. I dropped the phone. It fell onto the plush rug with a soft thud. I sank to my knees, pressing my hands to my mouth as a hysterical sob tore through my throat. The 14th of October, 2023. Exactly 3 years before my death. I remembered this day perfectly. It was a Saturday. It was the day of the Montgomery Autumn Gala at the St. Regis Hotel. It was the night my father officially announced my engagement to Liam, and the night I foolishly signed over my proxy voting rights to him as a sign of my complete trust and devotion. It was the night my slow march to the grave began. I stayed on the floor for a long time, the shock giving way to a cold, razor-sharp clarity. The universe had torn the fabric of time to spit me back out. The desperate, love-starved Skylar Montgomery died in that hospital room. The woman kneeling on the floor of the penthouse was something else entirely. I walked back to the mirror and looked myself in the eye. I didn't see a victim anymore. I saw a weapon. "They want my shares," I whispered to the empty room, a terrifying smile spreading across my face. "They want my life. Let's see how much they enjoy it when I burn their empire to the ground." The first step was survival. I couldn't just walk away. Richard Montgomery was a powerful, vindictive man. If I tried to leave the family and take my 40% stake, he would tie me up in litigation for decades, or worse, orchestrate an accident much sooner. I needed an ally. I needed a shield. Someone with enough power, money, and ruthlessness to make my father terrified to even look in my direction. I walked over to my desk and opened my laptop. I typed a single name into the search bar: Dominic Rossi. The screen flooded with articles, Forbes covers, and paparazzi shots. Dominic Rossi, the CEO of Obsidian Capital. He was 32, a self-made billionaire, and a notoriously ruthless corporate raider. He was known as the Devil of Wall Street, but more importantly, he was my father's worst nightmare. For the past 2 years, Rossi had been slowly acquiring Montgomery Enterprises suppliers, choking my father's supply chains, boxing him into a corner. My father hated him, but he feared him more. I spent the next 6 hours compiling a very specific flash drive. I used all the clearance codes I had memorized over my years of running the company's back end. I downloaded offshore accounts, embezzlement records, illegal kickbacks my father had given to politicians. Everything Vanessa was too stupid to understand, and Liam was too arrogant to look for. Tonight, the trajectory of my life was going to change. I wasn't going to sign my life away to Liam Preston. I was going to make a deal with the devil. The St. Regis Grand Ballroom was a sea of crystal chandeliers, flowing champagne, and the suffocating hypocrisy of high society. The elite of the city were gathered, laughing and clinking glasses, completely oblivious to the rotting core of the Montgomery family hosting them. Normally, I would have worn a muted, conservative beige gown, something Evelyn always picked out so I wouldn't overshadow Vanessa. Not tonight. Tonight, I wore a backless silk slip dress in the color of freshly spilled blood. The crimson fabric clung to my curves, slit daringly high up my thigh. I paired it with diamond drop earrings and a matte red lip. When I walked down the grand staircase, the low hum of conversation actually paused. Heads turned. I saw Evelyn's jaw tighten from across the room. I saw Vanessa's eyes narrow with instant, toxic jealousy. And I saw Liam. He detached himself from a group of investors and walked toward me, his tailored tuxedo fitting him perfectly. His blonde hair was swept back, his smile practiced and charming. Just looking at his face made the phantom taste of bitter almonds rise in the back of my throat. I had to dig my nails into my palms to stop myself from picking up a steak knife from a passing waiter's tray and driving it into his neck. "Skylar," Liam said, his eyes raking over me with a possessive gleam, "you look different. Stunning, but different. Your mother was looking for you. The lawyers are upstairs with the proxy forms." He reached out to touch my waist. I took a smooth step back, letting his hand grasp empty air. "Liam," I said, my voice cool and even, "I won't be signing those forms tonight, or ever." His charming smile faltered, replaced by a flash of genuine annoyance. "What are you talking about? We discussed this, Skylar. It's a gesture of unity for the board before we announce the engagement." "I've decided I prefer to manage my own assets," I replied, grabbing a flute of champagne from a tray. "You'll just have to prove your business acumen without my 40% backing you. I'm sure a genius like you won't have a problem." Liam stared at me, his mask slipping. "Skylar, don't play games. Your father expects this done before his speech." Before he could grab my arm, Vanessa materialized beside us. She was wearing a voluminous, pale pink ball gown that made her look like a giant pastry. "Skylar," she gasped, her hands flying to her mouth in mock horror. "What are you wearing? Mother is furious. And why are you upsetting Liam? You know how stressed he is about the merger." I looked at my sister, the woman who would one day mock me, as my heart stopped beating. "Vanessa," I smiled sweetly, "I know reading is difficult for you, but the dress code on the invitation said formal, not pastel cupcake. And Liam's stress is his own problem. Now, if you'll excuse me," Vanessa gasped, stepping back as if I had struck her. Liam's face turned an ugly shade of red. "Skylar, what the hell has gotten into you?" "Self-respect," I murmured. "You should look into it." I turned my back on them and walked into the crowd. I didn't have time for their petty outrage. I was hunting. I scanned the room until I felt a sudden shift in the atmosphere. Near the massive double doors leading to the terrace, the crowd had instinctively parted. There he was. Dominic Rossi did not fit in with the polished, old-money aristocrats of this room. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and moved with the silent, lethal grace of a predator who had somehow found himself in a room full of sheep. His black suit was bespoke, but he wore it casually, without a tie, the top 2 buttons of his dark shirt undone. His jaw was sharp, covered in a faint shadow of stubble, and his eyes, a striking, cold slate gray, were currently sweeping the room with absolute disdain. I saw my father, Richard, freeze mid-conversation halfway across the room. A bead of sweat visibly broke out on his forehead. Dominic Rossi wasn't invited. He had simply walked in, and no one had the courage to stop him. Dominic bypassed the bar and stepped out onto the dimly lit terrace, away from the noise. This was my chance. I slipped through the open French doors, leaving the stifling heat of the ballroom behind. The autumn air was crisp. Dominic was standing by the stone balustrade, lighting a cigarette. The brief flare of his lighter illuminated the harsh, beautiful lines of his face. "Those will kill you," I said softly, stepping out of the shadows. Dominic didn't startle. He slowly snapped the lighter shut and exhaled a plume of gray smoke, turning his head to look at me. His slate gray eyes dragged over my crimson dress, devoid of the lust Liam had shown, replaced instead by a clinical, razor-sharp calculation. "I'm surprised you're out here, Miss Montgomery." His voice was a deep, gravelly baritone that sent a strange shiver down my spine. "Shouldn't you be inside, blindly signing away your voting rights to that golden retriever you call a fiancé?" I smiled, stepping closer to the balustrade. "You have excellent spies, Mr. Rossi, but their information is outdated. I dumped the golden retriever about 5 minutes ago." Dominic arched a dark eyebrow, taking another drag of his cigarette. "Did you? Richard must be having an aneurysm." "He will be, shortly," I agreed, "especially when he finds out why I'm really out here." Dominic turned fully toward me, leaning his hip against the stone. He looked amused, dangerous, but amused. "And why is that? Did Daddy send you out here to bat your eyelashes and beg me to release my hold on his steel suppliers?" "My father doesn't know I'm out here, and I don't care about the steel suppliers." I reached into my clutch and pulled out the sleek, silver flash drive. I held it up between my fingers. "I know you've been trying to dismantle Montgomery Enterprises for 2 years. You're doing a decent job from the outside, but I can give you the blueprint to hollow it out from the inside." The amusement vanished from Dominic's face, replaced by a sudden, intense focus. "What's on that drive?" "Everything," I said, my voice dropping to a low, intense register. "The offshore accounts in the Caymans, the forged environmental reports for the Riverdale project, the illegal bribes given to Senator Hayes, the actual undoctored financial ledgers of the last 4 quarters. It's enough to trigger an SEC investigation that will bankrupt the company and put Richard Montgomery in federal prison." Dominic stared at the drive, then up at my eyes. For the first time, he looked genuinely taken aback. "You're his eldest daughter. You're the COO. You built half of that company's current infrastructure. Why would you hand me the matches to burn it down?" "Because they are parasites," I said, the raw, unfiltered truth bleeding into my voice. The memory of the hospital room flashed in my mind, and I am tired of bleeding for them. "I want them destroyed, Mr. Rossi, completely and utterly." Dominic stepped closer. He was much taller than me, his presence suffocatingly powerful. He looked down into my eyes, searching for a lie, for a trap. He found neither. Information like this isn't free, he said softly, his voice a low rumble. What do you want in return, Skylar? Protection, I answered without hesitation. If I do this, my father will freeze my trust. He will try to destroy me legally, financially, and physically. I need a shield he cannot break. I need assets he cannot touch. You want money. I want a marriage. Dominic froze. The silence on the terrace was deafening, broken only by the faint strains of the orchestra playing inside. He stared at me as if I had just lost my mind. A marriage, he repeated slowly. A legal binding contract, I clarified, holding my ground despite the intimidating aura rolling off him. If I am married to you, my father loses his legal guardianship loopholes over my grandfather's trusts. If I am your wife, Richard Montgomery wouldn't dare touch a hair on my head because he knows you would crush him. You get the keys to my family's empire, and I get my freedom and my vengeance. It's a simple business transaction. Dominic dropped his cigarette onto the stone floor and crushed it beneath his Italian leather shoe. He stepped directly into my space. The scent of him tobacco, expensive cologne, and something distinctly male was intoxicating. He raised a hand, his large, warm fingers gently tilting my chin up so I was forced to look directly into his slate-gray eyes. You're asking to marry the devil, Skylar Montgomery, he murmured, a dark, dangerous smile finally breaking across his face. Are you sure you know what you're stepping into? I didn't flinch. I didn't look away. I've already been to hell, Mr. Rossi, I whispered back. I'm not afraid of the devil anymore. Dominic's thumb lingered lightly on my chin for a fraction of a second before he stepped back, the dangerous smile settling into a look of predatory business focus. Have your bags packed by 8 o'clock tomorrow morning, he commanded, his gravelly voice leaving no room for argument. I will handle the logistics. Do not sign anything. Do not drink anything your family hands you, and keep your door locked. We go to Skadden, Arps, Slate, Meager, and Flom at 9 to draft the marriage contracts. By noon you will be a Rossi. He didn't wait for my confirmation. He turned and melted back into the shadows of the terrace, leaving me alone with the pounding of my heart and the intoxicating taste of impending victory. The next morning, the Oak Haven penthouse felt less like a home and more like a prison I was about to break out of. I was throwing the last of my silk blouses into my vintage Louis Vuitton steamer trunk when my bedroom door banged open. Vanessa stood there, her face blotchy and red, still wearing her makeup from the night before. Liam flanked her, looking like a whipped dog masquerading as a wolf. Where do you think you're going? Vanessa screeched, kicking a discarded shoe across the hardwood floor. You humiliated us last night. Liam had to do damage control with the Preston investors for 3 hours because you threw a childish temper tantrum. Father is practically vibrating with rage. You're going downstairs right now to apologize and sign the proxy forms. I'm moving out, Vanessa, I said evenly, snapping the brass locks of the trunk shut, and I suggest you lower your voice before I decide to pack my patience away permanently. You're not going anywhere, Liam stepped forward, dropping the charming facade, his hands clenched into fists. You're bound to this family, Skylar. You're bound to me. You think you can just walk away from the merger? From us? Before I could answer, the heavy oak door of my suite was pushed open entirely. My father, Richard, stood in the threshold, his face a mask of purple fury. Liam is right, Richard growled, stepping into the room. You have lost your mind, Skylar. I am freezing your bank accounts, your credit cards, and your trust fund effective immediately. You will not leave this house until you remember your duty to the Montgomery name. I think a deep, chilling voice echoed from the hallway that you will find her assets are no longer under your jurisdiction, Richard. The color drained from my father's face as Dominic Rossi strolled into the room. But he wasn't alone. Flanking Dominic were 4 men dressed in sharp, tactical suits. They didn't look like standard corporate security. They moved with the silent, synchronized lethality of an elite military strike team. I knew the rumors about Dominic's inner circle, that his company, Obsidian Capital, was quietly enforced by a private intelligence and security firm entirely staffed by his former brothers-in-arms from a Tier 1 Special Operations Unit. Seeing them in my bedroom, standing like immovable mountains of muscle and violence, confirmed it. Rossi, my father spat, though his voice trembled slightly. "What is the meaning of this? You are trespassing in my home." "I'm here to collect my fiancé," Dominic said smoothly, slipping his hands into his pockets as he surveyed the room with utter disgust. His slate-gray eyes landed on Liam. "And I suggest you tell your little errand boy to back away from my future wife before my men break his legs and throw him off the balcony." Liam practically teleported backward, his eyes wide with genuine terror as one of Dominic's operators took a single heavy step forward. Vanessa let out a strangled gasp, pressing her hands over her mouth. "Fiancé?" Richard choked out, looking between me and Dominic as if the world had suddenly inverted. "Skylar, what have you done?" "I secured my future father," I said, picking up my designer handbag and walking toward Dominic. He seamlessly wrapped a heavy protective arm around my waist, pulling me against his side. The heat radiating from him was an anchor. "Since you were so eager to sell me off to the highest bidder for corporate gain, I decided to cut out the middleman and choose a buyer who actually terrifies you." You stupid, ungrateful girl!" my mother, Evelyn, shrieked, finally appearing in the doorway. "He's using you. He wants the company." "Oh, Mother," I smiled. "A cold, empty thing. He doesn't want the company. He just wants to watch it burn." And I handed him the matches. Dominic chuckled, a low, dark sound. "Gentlemen, get my wife's luggage. We have an appointment at Skadden to get to, and then a stop at Cartier. I believe a 10-carat flawless diamond is required to finalize this hostile takeover." As the operators hoisted my heavy trunks onto their shoulders effortlessly, I walked out of the Oakhaven estate without looking back. Behind me, I could hear the shattering of glass and the sound of my father screaming. It was the sweetest music I had ever heard. 3 weeks later, the Montgomery Enterprises annual shareholders meeting was held in the glass-walled conference room on the 50th floor of the Montgomery Tower. The air conditioning was cranked high, but the tension in the room was suffocating. I sat at the far end of the long mahogany table, perfectly poised in a tailored white Tom Ford suit. Beside me sat Dominic, looking like a dark king, presiding over a court of fools. Richard stood at the head of the table, sweating profusely under the harsh, recessed lighting. The past 3 weeks had aged him a decade. Once our marriage was legally filed and publicized by the Wall Street Journal, Montgomery Enterprises stock had plummeted 20%. Investors panicked, sensing blood in the water. "Ladies and gentlemen," Richard began, clearing his throat loudly. He avoided looking at me. Despite recent personal disruptions, I am thrilled to announce that the final hurdle for the Preston merger has been cleared. This acquisition of Liam Preston's tech startup will revolutionize our logistics division. Liam, sitting 2 seats down from my father, puffed out his chest, flashing a smug smile at the board members. He thought he had won. He thought that even without my shares, they had managed to pull the wool over the board's eyes. I tapped my perfectly manicured fingernail against the mahogany table. "Before we vote on a merger that will effectively bankrupt this company," I spoke up, my voice cutting through the silent room like a diamond cutter. "I believe the board should review the supplementary packets my husband's firm has provided." Right on cue, Dominic's men dressed impeccably in suits today, though their military bearing remained unmistakable, stepped into the room and placed a thick black folder in front of every board member. "What is this, Skylar?" Richard demanded, his face flushing red. "You have no authority here anymore. Your shares are tied to Obsidian Capital now." "Exactly," Dominic drawled, leaning back in his leather chair. "Which makes me the largest majority shareholder of Montgomery Enterprises. And as the majority shareholder, I ordered an independent audit." I opened my folder. Turn to page 4. Gentlemen, what you will see is the truth behind Liam Preston's so-called revolutionary startup. It is a shell company. The patents are fraudulent, and the revenue streams are entirely fabricated. The boardroom erupted into frantic whispering. Pages turned rapidly. Liam's smug smile vanished, replaced by a sickly, chalky pallor. "That's a lie!" Liam shouted, standing up so fast his chair tipped over. "Those documents are forged!" "They were acquired directly from J.P. Morgan Chase's private servers during discovery," I replied calmly. "You see, Liam, when you applied for that massive bridge loan last week, you inadvertently opened your books to their risk assessment team. A team Dominic happens to hold considerable leverage over. You are $50 million in debt, Liam. You aren't a savior. You're a parasite trying to latch onto my family's sinking ship. Sinking ship? One of the older board members gasped, looking at my father. Richard? What is she talking about? Turn to page 12, I instructed, my eyes locked dead on my father. He looked like he was going to vomit. You'll find the routing numbers for offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. Accounts that hold the company's pension funds. Funds that our esteemed CEO has been quietly embezzling for the last 5 years to cover up his disastrous real estate gambles. Shut up, Vanessa screamed from the gallery seating at the back of the room. She's just a jealous, bitter bitch. Don't listen to her. Security, Richard roared, slamming his fists on the table. Remove them! The doors to the conference room opened, but it wasn't the building's security detail. A dozen men and women in dark windbreakers with the letters FBI printed across their backs filed into the room, followed closely by agents from the Securities and Exchange Commission. Richard Montgomery, the lead agent stated, flashing a badge. We have a warrant for your arrest on charges of wire fraud, embezzlement, and violating the Sarbanes-Oxley Act. Liam Preston, we also have a warrant for your arrest for defrauding investors and bank fraud. Pandemonium broke out. Board members scrambled away from the table. Vanessa began to wail, a high-pitched, hysterical sound, as an agent grabbed Liam by the arms and forced them behind his back. The cold click of handcuffs echoed off the glass walls. My father didn't fight. He just stared at me, his eyes wide with absolute ruin. You destroyed us, he whispered. Your own flesh and blood. I stood up, buttoning my white suit jacket. I walked over to him, leaning in close so only he could hear me over the chaos. 3 years from now, you were going to watch me die in a hospital bed, I whispered, the memory of the poison still a phantom ache in my chest. Consider this an act of mercy. At least you get to live. I turned my back on the wreckage of the Montgomery family. Dominic was waiting for me at the door, holding out his hand. I placed mine in his, the weight of the massive Cartier diamond, cool against my skin. The devil of Wall Street looked down at me, a flicker of genuine pride in his cold eyes. We walked out of the building together, leaving my past in ruins, ready to conquer whatever the future held. Do you love seeing toxic families and backstabbing exes get the karma they deserve? This is just the beginning of Skylar and Dominic's ruthless empire. If you want to see how the devil of Wall Street and his brilliant wife conquer the world next, make sure to hit that like button, leave a comment with your favorite twist, and subscribe so you never miss an episode of their revenge.